Story 1. I think Fort Knox isn't really as big of a deal. The real gold mine is the Federal Reserve Bank of New York building, where not just the United States but also a bunch of other nations keep their gold. There have been all sorts of conspiracy theories about that in the past, not helped by the fact that representatives of foreign countries trying to audit for publicity stunts weren't quite granted the level of access one might need to check that the gold really was still there. Also, one of those die-hard movies featured the vault as a target of criminals. Story 2. The United States is not on the gold standard since 1971, so the dollar is not backed by gold, so probably not much. Story 3. The whole system would collapse and the effect on billionaires would be, just kidding. Nothing. Nothing serious would happen. A few people would be thrown under the bus. There would be some scapegoats. That's about it. Story 4. In 1974, a group of United States senators, congresspeople, and journalists visited the Fort Knox Bullion Depository in Kentucky to inspect the gold reserves. The visit was in response to claims that there was no gold in the depository. On September 23, 1974, the United States Treasury opened one of the vault compartments to allow visitors to see the gold. The visit was more of a publicity stunt than a credible audit. Visitors were able to hold a gold bar and see a room full of gold. Visitors were metal inspected to ensure they didn't take any gold out. No bars were matched to a serial number, assayed, or tested for purity. Audits of the compartments began in 1975 and continued for the next decade. The audits included weighing, assaying, and counting the gold. However, the United States government lost 7 of the audit reports. Story 5. I've audited several places for physical storage of sensitive materials. The 2 most impressive were Utah's Iron Mountain Granite Vault, which I was told housed the original copy of the Declaration of Independence during World War II, and the second being Paxos Cryptocurrency Vault with physical gold storage in an undisclosed location in New York. Paxos by far was superior. Story 6. There isn't enough gold in Fort Knox to back the United States dollar. There hasn't been for decades. That's not how it works. Gold is also stored in more locations, with Fort Knox being the primary reserve. When they say they want to audit Fort Knox, it's more of a generalization that they intend to audit our gold reserves, which are already audited regularly. So, this is more about Trump and Dogecoin setting up another, "Oh my God, look at all the fraud" claim. Story 7. Were missing, or were reported as missing by the misspeaking guy who can do an audit in a quick moment. I'd wonder how much gold a Cybertruck could carry, and how many of the auditors showed up driving their own vehicles instead of carpooling to save money. Story 8. There's an incredible lack of serious answers in here. To be fair, nobody knows what would happen and is only guessing. My guess is if 4,500 metric tons of gold that people thought were at Fort Knox, of the 244,000 global metric tons of gold, just wasn't there, there would be a big rally in the price of gold. In small part because of the loss in global supply, but more because of the fear this would cause due to the discrediting of the United States government, and partly because the United States government would possibly start buying gold to replace the stock that was supposed to be there. Story 9. The bring back the gold standard calls would be dead. Economically, it would be a serious issue. If you can't keep track of all that gold, good luck keeping track of anything wealth-wise, and confidence in the dollar would take another big hit. After all, who has faith in a country that loses billions in gold? Story 10. Realistically, nothing. Because the United States no longer uses a gold standard for currency valuation, the presence or lack of reserve gold is functionally irrelevant. For decades now, the United States government has only used precious metals to pay for some very specific contract services, mostly from overseas vendors. It has not backed our currency since 1965, so it does not matter. Story 11. Okay, so whether the gold is in Fort Knox or the Federal Reserve Building or wherever, if some kind of audit were to find that what's supposed to be wherever isn't there, my guess is that it would be referred to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for investigation. The paperwork would be audited to make sure the amount is correct or if they're chasing something that wasn't stolen. Access logs would be reviewed, maybe camera footage. But in the end, it's a criminal investigation. It may become a cold case if things have been gone for a long time. Story 12. Politically, it would be a scandal. Economically, not much. First off, the gold standard is deader than Elvis. Second, the amount of bullion the United States holds is a drop in the ocean compared to what gets pulled in from income taxes or treasury bills every year. Story 13. That's been the rumor since Reagan's first term, that much of it was sold off to stop Carter's hyperinflation, and other presidents have plundered it over time. Every president since Reagan has rejected an audit. Story 14. Honestly, I would be surprised if the gold reserves survived an audit. I expect it's short. I suspect that would be a reason to safeguard it from further depletion. Redistribution of wealth always goes up. It's too late, we are on course and America will pay for this choice. Story 15. As far as I know, our economy is not even remotely based on gold, so nothing matters at all. It is all made up and imaginary, and the financial market is nothing but dreams and collective delusions. Story 16. I don't know if it would really do much. I'm not sure who owns it to begin with. The one thing I would see is on the news of it being empty or nearly empty, physical gold prices would probably skyrocket. Story 17. Realistically, you cannot trust anything Musk says, so if financial knowledge was audited, you have to assume whatever is said about it is only meant to elevate his and Trump's position somehow. Story 18. Nothing. Gold has not mattered for close to 100 years. I'm sure some discrepancy will be found and conservatives will pretend to care about gold for a while to give their voter base and content creators something to focus on as their latest distraction. Story 19. Panic brought on by the sorts of people who believe the value of gold is not arbitrary, resulting in a loss of confidence in the dollar, which is the only real measure of the actual power of the dollar. So, in short, economic collapse even though there is no logic to it. Story 20. Our government isn't run for or by the people anymore. It's for and by the oligarchs now. We'd never hear about it unless someone wanted to use it for manipulation reasons. That's the only reason they tell us anything anymore. Politics is all a facade. Story 21. Elon Musk should not be allowed near our nation's gold reserves. Just going to leave this here for anyone that recognizes how familiar this all feels. Story 22. No matter when it happened or who did it, they would blame Biden immediately. I am picturing a Ben Garrison comic with Biden sleeping in old-school Ebenezer Scrooge pajamas while George Soros, as the devil, sneaks past with a cart of gold. Story 23. There are two guys who look like an unattractive version of my uncle, and they have twice the money Fort Knox holds. It's not really that essential to the success or continued operation of the United States of America. I've always considered Fort Knox to be more of a $500 billion curiosity. Story 24. I'm pretty sure they are auditing it regularly, but I am not sure we keep the same quantities of gold there versus places like the Federal Reserve Bank anymore since we no longer back the currency with gold. Story 25. I am sure the current administration will find things missing, no matter if they were missing before or not. The country is being looted as we speak, and 31% of the voters don't see the real reason. Story 26. There is an urban myth going around that someone in China created a fake gold brick made of tungsten, gold, and lead that can beat the standard methods for detection. The myth is that so much of this fake gold went into storage in various foreign nations that it needed to be slowly unwound to avoid crashing the economy. Fake gold is much more of a problem than missing gold. Story 27. It is not going to make the papers or television news. It would be buried very deep under the Schaefer Commission report. Read it if you can find it. Nixon disagreed with its conclusions, as did Obama with the Harvard study. Our tax dollars at work, you know? No one of any consequence would suffer any real punishment. They would be allowed to retire and disappear from public view. Some will be forced to return the gold to the ones that caught them. How much will ever make it into the vault? If anyone pays a real price, it will be a captain in a basement office and a couple of enlisted. It is a security issue. We are not allowed to tell you. Doubtless, people will die in tragic car crashes or in firearm cleaning accidents, but they knew what they were doing when they took the money. Story 28. Markets would panic, gold prices would soar, the dollar could weaken, and trust in the United States government would take a massive hit. Conspiracy theories and investigations would explode. Story 29. If it were someone rich or famous, it is likely nothing would happen. If someone poor has something to do with it, They would bring down the hammer of justice on them so quickly. Story 30. I do not think anyone in the United States would care. Nothing matters anymore. Cryptocurrency enthusiasts and now the federal government see gold as a useless relic, even as other countries' central banks have been furiously buying lots of it. And most of the citizens are too uninformed to understand monetary or currency dynamics, so it would likely be met with a shrug and replaced in the news headlines within a day, assuming it even made the headlines at all. Story 31. We would not know, especially if you do not believe those in charge. Whatever results make the point is the one that they will say is true. Independent auditors are required for accountability in all cases. People cannot police themselves. Conflicts of interest cannot be left to self-report. Mishandling of data cannot be left to one person or one organization to call themselves on. Things that require trust have to be worthy of that trust. You do that by making someone responsible for testing why it is trustworthy. Someone not beholden or accountable to the party being tested. Story 32. I would think since it is a part of the Treasury and they are required to be audit-ready 100%, there wouldn't be any questions. I would just worry that the last Trump person who went in probably dropped a little in his purse. Story 33. You would find out it had been funneled to shady organizations with overly general names run by friends and family of political donors, then routed into the campaign funds of our exceptionally corrupt politicians. Story 34. Does it really matter? Gold really isn't worth much to humans anyways. You can't eat it, drink it, or use it to build shelter. It's a representation of wealth, just like the dollar. People simply believe it's worth something. Always found this insane. Story 35. Nowadays, nothing would happen. Not only that, whoever broke the news would be fired, blacklisted, and retaliated against. We live in a consequence-free world. Story 36. It's unrealistic to think those with a vested interest in knowing their gold reserves are intact would not regularly conduct audits on their own. This question is loaded with conspiracy-level nonsense. Story 37. If our economy were based solely on our gold reserves, then it would be devastating, but our economy is heavily based on our gross domestic product, and I believe the United States has the largest. Story 38. The short version is, not much. The importance of gold reserves to the support of the dollar is minimal. I am sure gold traders would be very concerned, but aside from the psychological impact of making the government look more incompetent, it would not do much to the overall economy or capital markets. Story 39. The United States would deny, saying how it knew the gold wasn't really there all along, and that it's kept in another super-duper secret, safety-safe piggy bank elsewhere. Story 40. To be honest, I would question the source since this administration seems to be putting out so much bad information. That said, whether it was false or not, the damage to America would be done because too many naive individuals consume headlines and Facebook posts as fact. Story 41. Investigation, of course. But a lot of top-level elites are sure going to scramble, trying to hide traces of their involvement. But we are done with corruption, and I am sure each one of them will get hunted down. It does not matter if they are Democrat or Republican. That's the point of the Department of Government Efficiency. It wants to eliminate corruption and wastefulness. Nobody is safe. Story 42. Prior to this year, it would have been investigated and resolved. Now, however, Elon Musk and his best friend Vladimir Putin get to add to their fortunes, and no one ever hears about it because all of the people who keep an eye on that sort of thing have been fired. Meanwhile, Donald Trump gets to stay out of jail thanks to their help with the election. Where we stand now, we have to trust that three of the objectively least trustworthy people in the public eye, one of whom has been determined on the destruction of the United States his entire adult life, will simply do the right thing with the nation's finances. It's not a recipe for a good outcome. Story 43. It was audited a number of years ago. They interviewed a guy who was a high schooler when he helped. He said it was the worst summer job he ever had. There was the initial thrill of being around such wealth, but after that wears off, you are hauling around super heavy metal bars all day long. Story 44. In reality, bond yields would skyrocket and the stock market would crash like you have never seen before. All confidence in United States-based hard assets would dissolve. It would be very, very bad. Story 45. I've been under the belief for a while now that gold was gone not too long after we came off the gold standard. I would be very surprised if there is anything in there. Story 46. I have been holding on to the conspiracy theory that says the reason the amount of gold in Fort Knox is a secret is that there is a lot more gold there than people realize. There is a conspiracy theory that the United States allegedly found the missing Nazi gold from World War II and secretly shipped it off to the United States. It's probably nonsense, but it's a fun one. Story 47. I bet Elon or Trump could pull up and take as many gold bars as they would want. Who would stop them? Instead, they are doing it other ways behind our backs to keep up the illusion. When you are a dictator, it is all yours. Story 48. At least we know they wouldn't be able to load it into the back of Cybertrucks. Those things break if you put more than a few pounds of load in the back.